Hi, welcome to part 1 of my 3-part portrait drawing series. I'm Asia and I'm a part-time artist who works mainly with color pencils. In this video, we'll be focusing on the foundational steps of drawing a portrait, getting the sketch ready, planning out our highlights and shadows, and setting up the underdrawing. This is the groundwork that brings structure and balance to the entire piece. If you'd like, grab your sketchbook and color pencils and follow along. You can create your own version of this portrait as I work on mine. Along the way, I'll be sharing tips on how to draw realistic facial features, so make sure to pay close attention. These tips are sprinkled throughout and can be super helpful for building your skills and confidence in portrait drawing. Let's get started. The first thing I always do before applying any color is refine my pencil sketch. I like to erase most of the graphite lines using a kneaded eraser. If you've never used one before, they are soft and moldable, making them perfect for lifting pencil marks without damaging your paper. With the lines faint and clean, I lightly go over the main contours of the face using a light brown color pencil. I'm using a Faber-Castell Polychromos pencil in a soft, warm brown shade. This creates a natural base for the skin tones we'll be adding later. It's important not to press too hard. Keep these lines delicate so they blend easily into your layers of color. At this stage, I'm not worrying about details. I'm simply mapping out the areas where the features sit and ensuring the proportions feel right. Now that our sketch is ready, it's time to establish the highlights. Highlights are areas where light naturally reflects off the face, creating contrast and depth. They're crucial for making your drawing feel three-dimensional. Using a white color pencil, I mark the highlights on the skin. Pay attention to areas like the high points of the cheeks, the bridge of the nose, or another example, the inner corners of the eyes. These spots catch the most light and will help define the overall lighting in the portrait. For the eyes, I add a tiny white highlight in the iris. This single mark is small but so important. It's what gives the eyes the sparkle and brings life to the portrait. Next, we're moving into the underdrawing stage. This is one of the most important parts of creating portrait because it lays the foundation for all the layers to come. For this portrait, I've chosen a warm, autumn-inspired palette with lots of earthy browns. When I was working on this piece, it was early autumn and I was inspired by the warm, cozy colors of the season. I wanted to reflect that mood in my work. At this stage, I'm still not focusing on details. Instead, I'm lightly shading in the main shapes, identifying where the lights, midtones and shadows will go. I use soft, thin layers to start building the structure of the portrait. This stage is all about playing shapes, values and colors. I block in the main features, eyes, nose, mouth and their surrounding areas. I identify the lightest and darkest areas. Squinting your eyes as you look at your reference can help with this. I choose and place base colors. The underdrawing isn't about perfection, it's about creating a roadmap to guide you through the rest of the process. Let's pause for a quick tip on values. When you squint your eyes, it's easier to see the overall light and shadow on your reference. This helps you focus on the values, the relationship between light and dark in your drawing. Now open your eyes to observe the colors. Combining this approach helps you balance the structure and tones of your portrait. Remember that the underdrawing is not the final look, it's a blueprint for the rest of your drawing. It allows you to adjust proportions, values, and color placement early on, before committing to the details. When it comes to drawing portraits, there's no one-size-fits-all method. I like to alternate between two different approaches depending on my mood. Sometimes I'll work on one part of the face at a time, completing the eyes, nose or mouth fully before moving on to the next area. Other times, I prefer to block in colors and shapes across the entire face first. This method allows me to see the big picture and ensures that everything stays balanced as I refine the portrait. I'm starting with light, soft layers across the entire face, which gives me a cohesive base to build on. It's like constructing a puzzle. You outline the edges first and then fill in the middle pieces. Neither approach is better than the other. It all depends on what works best for you. I encourage you to experiment with both and see which feels more natural. As I continue to work on the underdrawing, I am constantly checking the proportions. Are the eyes symmetrical? Is the nose in the right position? Are the lights and shadows balanced? This is the stage where you can make adjustments and ensure everything feels right before adding details. It's important to take your time here. Rushing through the foundation can lead to frustrations later on when things don't align. Think of this stage as the skeleton of your portrait. It holds everything together. Don't forget to take breaks and step back from your drawing. This gives you a fresh perspective and helps you spot areas that might need tweaking. I also like to compare my work to the reference at a distance. This practice helps ensure your proportions and values remain accurate. As we transition to refining the facial features, let's take some time to focus on the key elements that bring life and realism to your portraits. These details might seem small, but they add incredible depth and dimension to your work. Eyes are often the focal point of a portrait, and capturing their complexity can truly transform your drawing. Let's start by addressing one of the most overlooked parts, the sclera, or the white of the eye. While it's tempting to leave it stark white, this would make the eye look flat and unnatural. The eyeball is round, so you want to add soft shadows along the edges and under the lids to emphasize its shape. I like to use light grays, soft blues or even warm beige or orange tones for this shading, depending on the light in the reference. Don't forget this small, shiny area along the lower eyelid. It's a subtle detail, but adding this wetness gives the eye a lifelike glow. Skipping it can leave the eye looking dry and overly simplified, so make sure to give it some attention. For the pupil, I switch between Caran d'Ache Luminance and Prismacolor Premier black pencils. Both brands offer beautifully rich, deep blacks that helps the pupil stand out. I layer these carefully to create an intense contrast that draws the viewer's attention. As for the lashes, especially on the lower lid, I recommend working with lighter tones first, like soft browns, and building up gradually. This method ensures that the lashes don't appear too stark or overly drawn. The key is to make them look soft and natural, following the natural direction of growth. Finally, I use my trusty white gel pen to add a tiny sparkle to the eye. A single highlight can bring so much life to your portrait. It's such a small step, but it really makes a huge difference. Moving to the eyebrows, I like to start with lighter brown shades to map out the overall shape and directions of the hairs. Remember that eyebrow hairs don't all grow in the same direction, so take your time to follow the natural flow. This attention to detail adds realism and texture to the portrait. Once I'm happy with the structure, I go back in with darker browns to add dimension, focusing on individual hairs to create a layered, natural look. For the finest details, I often use a soft beige pencil, like Caran d'Ache Luminance, to add highlights. This step ensures the brows don't look flat or overworked, keeping them soft and dimensional. The nose can be tricky, but the key is to avoid harsh lines. Instead, think of the nose as a series of soft transitions between light and shadow. The bridge of the nose will usually catch the most light, while the sides are often shaded. One of the most overlooked aspects of drawing a nose is the reflected light. This is the subtle light in the shadow due to light bouncing off the surrounding areas. Including this detail not only adds realism, but also ties the nose into the rest of the face, making it feel more integrated into the portrait. A good nose drawing isn't just about copying what you see. It's about understanding why light and shadow interact the way they do. Once you grasp this, it becomes so much easier to draw noses that feel natural and realistic. Let's finish up with the lips. Lips are incredibly expressive, and the colors you choose can add so much personality to your portrait. For this drawing, I'm using a mix of pinks, soft reds and purples to capture the natural tones of the lips. To add depth to the shadows, sometimes incorporate complementary colors like dark green. This might sound unusual, but it creates a much more dynamic and rich look than just relying on black. For the shine on the lips, I used my white gel pen to add highlights in areas where light would naturally reflect. This step gives the lips a glossy, lifelike appearance. Remember that less is more here. A few well-placed highlights can do wonders. And that brings us to the end of this first part of our portrait drawing process. Today we focused on laying the groundwork and refining some of the most expressive features of the face: the eyes, eyebrows, nose and lips. Each of these elements plays a vital role in creating a portrait that feels alive and realistic. In the next part of this series, we'll move on to one of my favorite steps: building and refining skin tones. I share my techniques for creating smooth skin, adding layers and balancing highlights and shadows for a cohesive and polished look. If you found this helpful, please consider checking my channel or Patreon page, where I share more tips and inspiration. There's so much more to come, and I'd love to have you along for this journey. Thank you so much for drawing with me today, and I can't wait to see you in the next part of this portrait drawing series. Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye!